You buy Bitcoin, you hold it for more than 4 years, Joe. That's my advice to everybody.
Fair to say you simply flooded the system with money?
Yes, we did. That's another way to think about it.
Where does it come from? Do you just print it?
We print it digitally.
I'm very bullish on the long-term viability of Bitcoin.
I was going to say, did that surprise you?
That surprised me how much that's gone up.
Hey, Internet, welcome back to another episode of New Foundations, the podcast brought to you by Acropolis, the Bitcoin Treasury company. We're back this week. It's our first episode of 2025, so Happy New Year. I'm here with my co-founder, Chase, and we have a great guest this week. We have Lis Lieu. He is the co-founder and CEO, or I believe just the founder of Mimesis Capital. We met last year back at the Michael Saylor MicroStrategy conference, so good to see you, man. Happy to have you on the pod.
Good to be here, Mason. It's been a while since we met in, I think in May, right? We've been in May during the MicroStrategy World.
Yeah, that was, I guess looking back on it, it was the calm before the storm. I mean, I'm sure that conference this year is going to have triple, quadruple the amount of people that were there. It was pretty low key back then. Hey, let's go ahead and get into it. Let's if you could please walk through your personal journey in Bitcoin. How has your understanding of it evolved over time since you first encountered it?
Well, yeah. So I first bought my first Bitcoin 2016. During my college at Fordham University. I was there study finance. They have very good business school. And during the college time, I actually joined a family office based out of New York. It's owned by a Chinese billionaire. Is just pressure to work with the CEO and the investment officer there. Just looking around different deals. And they have like specific investment area, which is during that time is called blockchain, right? They have like a blockchain division. They want to invest money into the startup that working on blockchain technology, right? And we all know, like, as a Bitcoiner, that is like blockchain, not Bitcoin, not blockchain, right? So I have like a pretty good front seat role, being a buy side. Looking into different deals and the ecosystem in crypto. And then after like a few months, I talked to different kinds of like chief investment officers, fund managers, startups, companies, and have a pretty good realization that Bitcoin is unique and others is kind of like a Ponzi. There's no foundation around those technology at all. They're just copycats of Bitcoin. But that was a very chaotic time. Like nobody really have, want to dig into what's the differences between Bitcoin, blockchain, Bitcoin, and other cryptos. And I talked to many prominent Bitcoiners during that time, but Bitcoin OGs. Because my position in the family fund, and that really gives me the kind of like enlightenment into understanding Bitcoin and its technology and its unique characteristic among all the assets. So after that, I joined a hedge fund. It's called Block Tower Capital, which is also based in New York during that time. That was straight out of college. So I worked there for very briefly. Have pressure to work alongside crypto hedge fund manager like Ari Paul and general partner like Michael Pusella. Those people are very kind to me. And have like another front row seat to look at how the crypto pump and downs work, right? And I was working at associate, also like on the investment desk, on the deal side of the investment, also on the fundraising. So have like a full perspective of how crypto fund actually work how they negotiate with crypto projects, how they do fundraising, how what's the pitch, to the institutional investor. And that time wasn't really it wasn't really a differentiate thesis between Bitcoin and crypto. It's like, Bitcoin is like just one of the crypto. There's no uniqueness around that. And they told you to diversify out of Bitcoin. And it turns out, right, you shouldn't diversify out of Bitcoin. So very quickly, I understand the investment thesis is so wrong. And I quit my job during the COVID time, which is March 20 something when the COVID hit. I left New York, went back to where I come from, where I born, Taiwan, Taipei. Actually started my own family fund. So I call my family members, moms and pops, family members in my town, just let them know we need to buy Bitcoin, right? We need to buy as fast as possible. We need to set up a proper structure to manage those Bitcoin. And so quickly, we bought some Bitcoin during March, and then April, and then May, and we just bought all the way through. And we also invested in Bitcoin startups, like Onchain Capital, Satoshi Energy, Swan Bitcoin. Those wasn't really a popular name back in time, but now it's like pretty popular among the Bitcoin community. Also we do some secondary as well, like invest in MicroStrategy. I was meeting Michael during the 2022 bear market, and that's when I realized, that the company is pretty unique. So I also invested in like Bitcoin proxy, but mainly just MicroStrategy. That's just the overview of my journey into Bitcoin. Yeah.
And so, Luis, my understanding is that Mimesis Capital is a kind of a Bitcoin-denominated fund in the sense that you're looking for Bitcoin-denominated returns. And maybe with your LPs being friends and family, this isn't as important. But how do you kind of communicate to the LPs of the fund that there's an advantage to investing in Bitcoin businesses where there's operational risk or illiquid shares, as opposed to just buying and holding spot Bitcoin? How do you kind of weigh that investment decision and communicate that with those LPs?
So first of all, I think family office fund has a really unique structure. We don't have like a GP-LP relationship. It's just me and my family managing the capital, mainly just me. Very small team, maybe just 2 or 3 main people. Shareholder are very very small. We don't have 1,000 shareholder. We don't have a lot of like people to manage. So it's a little bit different than the traditional hedge fund VC structure. It is more flexibility in terms of where you deploy capital, how you strategize your position, how you're gonna move forward faster, leaner. I think it's really, very good structure for a Bitcoin standard. So I really want to build something on top of Bitcoin that is unique to myself and unique to my family. So family fund is really a way to go, because you don't have to be called in capital, right? For example, if you manage a fund of LPs, you constantly get calls on capital, right? After a year, after 2 years, depends on how we structure it. For us, we don't. We have permanent internal capital, right? It's a family stay, it's a family capital, so we can invest as long as as it can take, pretty much forever. And Bitcoin is the right asset for that kind of structure, because we don't have to constantly debate on should we sell it, should we do this, or should we do that, or like after a year, after 2 years, should we just buy it, different stuff, should we develop different pieces? No, it's a long-term capital, or basically it's a permanent capital beyond the beyond Bitcoin, right? So that's unique way of investing. in Bitcoin, and which a lot of funds out there doesn't really have that advantage. And one disadvantage that we have is we cannot really go out there and do a lot of fundraising. I personally don't like that because it's just subject to all sorts of opinions and charters, right? Because some fund can only invest in this asset, some fund can only invest in that asset. It's really strict, and for us, there's no actual restriction, and I think that's perfect for Bitcoin asset. Yeah.
Moving more into Bitcoin broadly, you've talked about your family's history of, losing wealth during the Chinese takeover of Taiwan in the 1940s. I am intimately familiar with this because I studied abroad in Shanghai, so I kind of understand how the Chinese Communist Party works and, the risk to capital over there. So how do you see Bitcoin with its features of, being incorruptible and decentralized? How do these address the historical issues of wealth preservation in places like China for families like yours?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. I think there's a lot of like human history is involved in destruction of wealth, mainly when regime collapse, there's takeover of a new regime, and in that process, you get a lot of wealth destroyed. And for my family, is like we have been in Taiwan for a long time, right? We come from China, but we have been in Taiwan for a long time. We have land, we have business that's well developed. We have acres of land, which is we are landlord basically. But when the Chinese Communist Party defeat the Nationalists, I think in 1949, the Nationalists escaped from China. They actually escaped from Shanghai because that's where their main headquarters are at. So there's a bunch of like people coming from mainland China during that time. And Nationalists kind of took over the Taiwan's government. During that time, there's actually no Taiwan government. It's actually the Japanese government just left, and it's kind of like a vacuum stage. So anyone with military and political power can seize Taiwan, and that's what nationalists do. When they came, they just feel like this is their land, and they basically issue like a policy where all the landlords have to give up the land to the farmers. And why is that? Because the nationalists want to fight back. They want to go back to mainland China, defeat the Communist Party. So they need a lot of food to support the military. But that never happened, right? The nationalists never went over to China and fought again. They just stay here in Taiwan, and all the landlord in Taiwan get screwed, right? The land get stolen, the wealth get destroyed, and people after that generation live in poverty. So my grandfather actually are the live in poverty during that time because his father inherited the land, but the land get stolen by a nationalist, using this farmer policy. And that also happens in China as well. Like when communist China take over, they also do that. Like all the lands belongs to communist China now. So there's no private property. There's no property right. And luckily for us in Taiwan, like we actually have democracy right now, but previously we don't, right? Now we do have private property law. You as a Taiwanese citizen, you actually own land. You actually can own properties, and government protects that. So if you look out through the history, right, there's always a destruction of wealth. And why is that? It's because Some wealth, like real estate, like land, is easy to seize once the political regime change. And that happens throughout thousands of years in Chinese history. Whenever there's a switch in power, all the wealth getting redistributed. And I think right now, if you look at Ukraine, which is in the war right now, look at the citizen there, right? They don't have right to own the land. Even they have a land there, they have to abandon it, right? So it's a really tough situation to be at if your wealth is stored in land, because it can get taken away by a corrupted regime or during the regime change. And it's interesting that when nationalists come to Taiwan, they bought a lot of gold. They also bought a lot of art, right? You can see in Taiwan National Palace, which they're stored all the scarce art, antiques are actually worth a lot of money, right? Probably worth more than the gold that we have in fiat term. Why is that? Because art is movable, right? Gold is movable. So they carry a lot of those scarce, desirable goods all the way from mainland China, to Taiwan. That's how they store their wealth. That's how the nationalists, get their wealth out of China, right? But all the lands they left behind, and they came here and destroyed, the landlords in Taiwan. So that's a situation, throughout different regime, different civilization. And you think about Bitcoin, right? Why you want to build your family state? Why you want to capitalize your family in Bitcoin? It's pretty simple, right? It's because the property that Bitcoin carries is unique. Why is it unique? First, right, is you don't have to pay any maintenance costs, and you can transfer it peer to peer via the internet, right? And there's very minimal cost for you to transfer $1 billion worth of Bitcoin to anywhere in the world, right? And it's not destructible, right? There's no any political regime can destroy what you own in the Bitcoin world, right? They can destroy your Bitcoin, right? If you memorize the private key, you can even carry the wealth, $1 billion worth of Bitcoin wealth in your head, right? And if you go back in history, if you have that option, right, and your country is facing a regime change, would you rather to own gold, art, land, or are you willing to own Bitcoin because it's a superior form of store of wealth, right? And for you to carry your wealth away from the destruction. So that's the basic thesis behind owning Bitcoin. And I think, most people haven't really realized the significance of it, because they don't think about the history. They don't think the history is going to repeat. I'm not saying that, the destruction is coming and there's a regime change, but, you want to be prepared for that to happen, right? And for me, it's like no brainer to store your wealth in Bitcoin, because that's the purpose of Bitcoin. It's just a better, superior store of wealth compared to land, art, gold, and you have to be prepared for the worst situation to come, right? And that's where you're going to store your wealth. You're going to store wealth into something that it's just easy to transfer and easy to access after shit happens, right? And I think in the fiat world, when central bank is printing that much money, $1 trillion of money, not just U.S. governments, but everywhere around the world, how are you going to protect yourself against the purchasing power, right? And that's just one level of destruction that government can bring on its citizen, or on the, on the wealth preservation side, inflation is just crazy, right? And you need some protection. And not only that, Bitcoin protects you from inflation, right? It protects you from regime change. And you will be able to move around much more easily, right? Your wealth is protected by this encrypted wall of hash power. For many family, I think that's a great asset to own. And not just for my own family. But if you look into my own family history and look across the world history and civilization collapse, you better think about owning something like Bitcoin, right?
Embrace the future of corporate finance with Acropolis, your strategic partner for a Bitcoin treasury strategy. We're the experts your business needs. Acropolis offers trusted Bitcoin advisory. We provide you with an outsourced Bitcoin strategy officer, world-class research, an accretive financing team, and more, so you can navigate Bitcoin's market with confidence and acumen. Best-in-class custody with multi-institution custody. Eliminate the risk of loss while maintaining full control of real Bitcoin. Acropolis exclusively uses multi-institution custody as the safest and easiest way for businesses to hold Bitcoin. Bitcoin-only solutions. The Acropolis platform is designed for businesses of all sizes to seamlessly manage their Bitcoin treasury, and we focus solely on Bitcoin to offer you the most specialized services available. Adding Bitcoin to your balance sheet is just the beginning. With Acropolis, you're not just adopting Bitcoin, you're mastering its strategic use to create and maintain value for generations. Take the first step and start your corporate Bitcoin journey with Acropolis. Book your free consultation today at acropolistreasury.com/book and start implementing our proven strategies within days.
Yeah, and you mentioned this earlier, the idea of permanent capital, and you kind of just made me think about it again there with this idea that, your land can be taken from you and, your gold can be seized, but Bitcoin, you can really just move yourself, your body anywhere in the world and take that capital with you. And I know it's not really what, we would in finance refer to as permanent capital. So kind of turning to the more traditional version of permanent capital on the balance sheet, this is different than revenue, which most companies have to pour back into operations. And I think that this is perhaps one of the most underappreciated aspects of the MicroStrategy strategy, is that all of that capital, all of that Bitcoin acquisition is permanent capital. It does not need to be, poured back into future growth to create future revenue. It is just permanent capital that sits on the balance sheet in their treasury. And so, as you know, Acropolis is a Bitcoin treasury company. And so I'm curious, in your opinion, what is the benefit of Bitcoin being integrated into treasury operations and having this permanent capital on the balance sheet? And kind of like, if you had to give the biggest benefit and the biggest challenge to date in trying to, implement a Bitcoin treasury.
Well, I think most people just can get around it, owning a asset like Bitcoin as first stop, right? They are fear of the volatility. They are fear that, maybe the quantum computer is going to disrupt the network. Maybe there's a better Bitcoin out there is going to replace the current one. So there's a lot of thoughts around this asset still today, right? Even you have Trump to endorse it. You have public companies endorse it. Companies like MicroStrategy bought, I think for 400,000 plus Bitcoin, heading toward 500,000. Even that kind of conviction cannot, convince a lot of, companies to buy Bitcoin on their treasury. So I think it's a slow adoption. I don't think Bitcoin is for every single corporation in the world. I think if you look at example like Nvidia, right, they are growing their business very, very fast. There's no capital allocation available for them to put into Bitcoin. So all the capital they generate from the business, they have to invest in the next generation of GPUs, right, to power the future of AI, right? So I think Bitcoin is for companies that has no growth, or are we call them zombie companies, right? And I think a lot of average people, average entrepreneur or business people, they don't own companies like Nvidia. They don't operate high growth startups or high growth business. That's just a reality of majority of the business in the world. Like most business are not high tech, right? So how do you inject growth into those quote unquote zombie company or steady revenue, no growth company? You buy Bitcoin, right? You think about how do you transform your balance sheet instead of thinking too hard on the problem of growing your revenue through the operating business. I think that's the major click that I think MicroStrategy has been thinking, and for most of us Bitcoiners already grasp this idea where you can capitalize on Bitcoin, transform your balance sheet, therefore growth can be injected into the company, right? I think this is a balance sheet transformation. I think this is a kind of like a financial engineering, but in a good way. And it's not destructible. It's actually accretive to the shareholders or to the family that own the business. And you no longer have to think about how should I really grow my business, and which is in the traditional sense, it can only grow at maybe 5%, maybe zero growth. So for many businesses like that, like restaurant, right? For example, like restaurant, how can you grow restaurant at the speed of Nvidia? There's no way, right? And so there's limitation for some kind of business like that. But we need those businesses to survive. We need those businesses to operate a civilization, to operate a society, healthy society. So we can now just looking for all kinds of growth on the revenue side, because that's destructive. That means what? That means if you have like $100 million of capital, and you own the restaurant, and your restaurant doesn't need $100 million of capital, right? You probably only put in 1 million is enough to sustain it. And if you are out of your mind and put 100 million into the restaurant, expanded it, you open many stores around the countries, and guess what? Yeah, you grow your revenue, but at the end of the day, if the business cannot sustain, it dies. So the 100 million become zero. And I think that's the reality of most business right now. Like they cannot put capital to work. So they have to buy treasury bond. They have to speculate on the stock market. They have to be like a hedge fund. But with Bitcoin, really flips the coin where now you have a growth engine on your balance sheet, and you just need to understand it and bought it, right? And now you don't have to worry about how to grow your revenue. You don't have to worry about basically the volatility of the business, right? You can do the same business every day, not to worry where to put the capitals. Yeah. So I think that's a revolutionary part of Bitcoin in the treasury. Every single company in this world can adopt it. For us, like for Mimesis Capital, we kind of like have a different approach in terms of like the treasury. Is that we value Bitcoin, and we wanted to establish it as like a family-owned asset, right? Instead of on the company side of the treasury. But it's kind of like same thing. But for us, it's more like how we gonna transfer that wealth across generation. And that's the main purpose for us. That's where that is a very little bit different than if you are a operating company or you are a public companies that has Bitcoin treasury, because you have to take care of the shareholders and all that stuff. But we don't. We just need to take care of our own family state, and we wish to pass it down for generations. that's a goal, right? The goal is a little bit different, but we treat it like a treasury in a sense. Yeah.
You probably didn't know this, but it's funny that you brought up the restaurant as an example because, like you, on an individual basis, I'm Bitcoin class of 2016, but my father and I, we own an Italian restaurant in Northern California, and we put that restaurant on a Bitcoin balance sheet treasury strategy in 2018. So we've done exactly that, and as you can imagine, pouring monthly cash flows into Bitcoin since 2018 has done really well for us. And with our new business that Mason and I are co-founding here with Acropolis, we also have a Bitcoin treasury. So Mason is also part of the early riders team, a Bitcoin denominated VC. And Acropolis is one of the portfolio kind of build venture type companies to come out of that. And we have basically received an initial allocation of Bitcoin that we don't, foresee ourselves using even if Bitcoin doesn't appreciate over the next, call it 4 to 5 years. And so what we're looking at is this idea of our Bitcoin treasury, this initial allocation, perhaps being the only capital that the business ever needs to raise, because as it appreciates over time, year over year, our runway continues to expand. And so I'm curious what you think of this idea of, perhaps founders and startups no longer taking the traditional route of, trying to grow to a certain milestone and raising that next dilutive round of capital, which can be a huge distraction and time suck away for the executive team of the business. And instead just trying to basically seed these startups with an initial Bitcoin treasury and letting them kind of grow into that and have the runway kind of expand forward in front of them. So how do you see this kind of Bitcoin treasury initial allocation idea perhaps rewriting the playbook for startups?
Yeah, great question. I often ask myself as well, like, how do I advise, startup founder on how to use the capital? I recently been thinking about this a lot because since the rise of the Bitcoin treasury company in the secondary market, a lot of Bitcoin startup has been lag behind a little bit because they don't have that much Bitcoin on balance sheet, or that's not the purpose of the businesses they're doing. They try to build technology that's useful, on Bitcoin, right? For example, like custody business or exchange business, and they raise capital to grow that business. But at the end of the day, they could just buy Bitcoin and maybe make more money in that way. So it depends, right? It depends on where the company is at, and it depends on the management team. It depends on a lot of factors to determine where should you put your capital. So I think a lot of like the Bitcoin startup that I invested in don't have large Bitcoin treasury. Some of them do, some of them don't. But they have some great business, right? And here's my ideas for them is why don't you raise two tranches of capital? One, you raise it through grow your business. You find investors that are interested to help you to grow your business. And second, you raise another capital raise for Bitcoin. Separate those two. You don't have to be, specific on using this capital just for investing in the company and investing in the business. You can be more strategic, around those capital raise. So that will be my solution for a lot of like startup founders out there that looking to raise capital. I think you can be very direct to your investor. Is that this capital is only for buying Bitcoin, right? And this kind of capital is only going to grow the business. But ultimately, it just depends on how the management team is looking at the whole space. Sometimes if you implement too aggressively on the Bitcoin treasury, when bear market comes, is going to be suck, right? I mean, same thing with the business, right? The business side of the Bitcoin ecosystem is also very volatile, matching the Bitcoin volatility, right? Because when Bitcoin in a bear market, the business is usually not doing good. So why not capitalize a little bit of your treasury in Bitcoin, right? So I think that's a new frontier that has been opened by MicroStrategy and MicroStrategy's followers, right? And there are very good Bitcoin companies out there building great infrastructure, great business. They just need to think about, I have this kind of great business. Why can't I just leverage the business to raise some capital to buy more Bitcoin, right? And I think that would be the compelling pitch to existing investor. Like they can raise via like convertible bond, or they can raise via preferred share, to dedicate it directly on buying Bitcoin. I think that's a route for a lot of Bitcoin startup out there. They can do exactly that, right? And I see a lot of companies like Fold, right? Fold is recently going reverse IPO, SPAC IPO actually. They recently just announced a convertible bond raise, and I think they specifically say that the convertible bond is going to buy Bitcoin, right? You can do that, right? And I think the startup today in Bitcoin shouldn't just think about how they grow the business, or the growth side of the business maybe just not as important right now as growing your Bitcoin treasury. So if you have already existing Bitcoin business that is growing pretty steady, you don't need a lot of capital to grow that business. I think it's good to start thinking about how do you grow your balance sheet side in Bitcoin, right? And if I'm a startup founder, I will do exactly that. I think Fold is a good example, right? They have a steady business. They don't need to really invest in 100 million into that business. Maybe there's a need, maybe there's no. But at this point of time, US is going to adopt, Bitcoin as strategy reserve. I think company has to think about how we can, how they can front run it, right? I don't think this is a time to think about how you front run the business or front run your competitors. I think right now is a time to how do you front run the nation in terms of how many Bitcoin you have. And that will provide a lot of growth, and that can propel the business growth as well. So that will be my suggestion. But each company have different reality, and they just have to adjust it going forward.
So how do you analyze this with your portfolio companies? Is it more of, an A/B test? It's more if this, then that. How do you decide that the accretive financing route is good for that company, and should they do it as much as possible? Why or why not?
Yeah. So great question. I think companies that are into Series B or Series C or much later stage, they can start thinking about raising additional capital into Bitcoin balance sheet. Because when you're at the stage of Series B and C, you kind of like you already have a lot of growth in the business, which the founder has to decide, do they need that much capital inject into the business operation? I think a great example can be Onchain, right? I think Onchain has pretty steady business, pretty solid team. I don't think they have to expand the team size to, they don't have to add another 1,000 people into the company, right? It's pretty steady already. So they could think about how they can raise like a convertible debt or preferred stock to actually build their Bitcoin balance sheet out and ready to go the route of IPO. I think it's important for a stage like that, like in B and C or beyond, to think about capitalize your balance sheet on Bitcoin. Because not only, the IPO market is going to look at it, they're going to look at, how many Bitcoin you have on the balance sheet that could determine the outcome of the IPO. Because I think the markets are demanding right now is if you have Bitcoin on your balance sheet, your stock go up 30%. right? I think that's the state of the market right now. And you just need to follow it, right? You have to just smell where the opportunity is. So I think the biggest opportunity right now for Series B and beyond company is actually go out and capital raise and use that capital raise to buy Bitcoin and hoping for 2025, which is, Trump is going to be very positive on the business activity. Like a lot of M&A is going to happen. A lot of IPO could happen, right? And you just hope you capitalize on that trend, and you have enough Bitcoin for the market participant to actually help you to go out there and raise more capital and eventually go IPO. And I think it's a good combination right now. If you have run a good Bitcoin business, combining with a big Bitcoin treasury, that is the goal, right, for most Bitcoin business out there. Like MicroStrategy has a lot of Bitcoin, but it has like a steady software business that's not related to Bitcoin. So I think that's a disadvantage to them if you think about it. Like a lot of startups, they start up with the mindset they want to build Bitcoin infrastructure, they want to build products. So they are very good at building those products, and they have found product market fits. And now they're gonna kind of like think about how can they go more aggressively on the acquiring Bitcoin part, right? Because MicroStrategy at one point is going to figure out how they can build maybe a software business on Bitcoin. Maybe they have to acquire some Bitcoin startup to strengthen their business intelligence business. That could happen in the next 2 year, 5 year when they done accumulating. Because eventually it's going to happen, because every Bitcoin companies out there, you can't just have large Bitcoin treasury, right? Eventually you need to own some kind of like operating business that is Bitcoin related. I think that's the future of the Bitcoin companies. It's not just a Bitcoin treasury. You need more. You need more products adding to that company, and finding a way to make a balance. That's what I think. Yeah, I don't think there's an exact playbook out there for any startup. But if I could think about is you have already a steady business growing. Now you can think about how you can add Bitcoin to the balance sheet. I think this, is no brainer, right? Everybody needs to think about that. Yeah.
I think you're right. Like in some sense, it makes sense for the business to focus on getting to some positive free cash flow with their actual operating business before they consider the accretive finance stuff. But at the same time, I guess just to kind of play devil's advocate, if you do the accretive finance stuff early on in the life of the business, say even before you scale your team or get customers, or have found product market fit, you're buying at today's Bitcoin prices. And so I think what we all understand, and what the founders of these Bitcoin companies that you're invested in understand, is that the value of money today is worth more than the value of that money tomorrow, so long as it's being put into Bitcoin at today's prices. And so I'm curious how you think about that from kind of the way that you would speak to your portfolio companies. For example, I don't see Bitcoin companies funded by Bitcoin-denominated venture funds or family offices being into this kind of Uber or Amazon style growth strategy where they go 15 years losing money for the ability to grab market share and monetize in the future, because that would mean that when you do go to monetize, you're monetizing your balance sheet with Bitcoin at, 3-4 cycles later and higher in price. And so perhaps the incentive for a Bitcoin company is to get to positive free cash flow as soon as possible, so that they can start actually converting some of that cash flow into Bitcoin for the balance sheet and not waiting for kind of a future grab at a larger market share. So how do you think about kind of that Uber model of kind of grow, burn, we'll monetize some point in the future on a Bitcoin standard?
Yeah, I think it's back to my previous point. I think companies on the Bitcoin standard can do two things, right? You raise capital to grow the business, and then you raise different capital to to increase the Bitcoin on the balance sheet. You can actually do that, right? You don't have to limit yourself into I have to only grow my business. I cannot grow my balance sheet. I think the brilliant entrepreneur, for example, like Michael Saylor has been doing, I think he doesn't really think about, I need to, it doesn't limit himself on the capital raise, right? You can see him raising through ATM, raising through preferred stock right now, raising through convertible debt. There's a lot, tons of capital out there that wanted to invest in specific instrument or terms. If you as a company founder, you can strike a term with the investors, I think that's good for the company overall. So I don't think it is that binary, and it also comes down to the timing of executing those strategy. Like right now could be a better time to put Bitcoin on a balance sheet, but it's even better you do it like 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, right? And it depends on how well you tap into the capital market. Like if you're just starting out gates, no products, just a vision, and you want to raise in Bitcoin, there's no I don't think you can find investors that are willing to do that because they want to see track record that you have been doing some business along the way. And MicroStrategy is actually unique, right? They have been doing this software business for 30 years. You think about it, right? And they have steady revenue, big enough enterprise, value. So they don't have to build products on Bitcoin. And they can just using the capital market to buy Bitcoin. And that doesn't you don't have that with startups. So startups, you really need to grow something out of nothing first. Convince the investor that give you the money to grow the business, giving them the projection that your revenue growth can beat Bitcoin, but most likely you don't. But you still have the capability to build products around it. I think that's a good thing because you don't know in the future, maybe in 10 years, 20 years, the product you build right now can grow pretty fast, right? Or the acquisition value of the product could be very, very high, can give investor a better return than Bitcoin. And there's another side of that is once you build a good enough track record, you can start to do all kinds of different fundraising. And I think that's for most company need to think about like what stage you are in right now. And depending on the stage, you go tackle different forms of capital raise. And I think right now the market has appetite for a Bitcoin Treasury company, and it's a plus, right? It's not a disadvantage that you have a track record on building products on the Bitcoin. So that's a plus, not a negative. And I think that's advantageous for Bitcoin startup right now to think about raising additional capital, on the Bitcoin balance sheet.
Last question from me, and I'm excited for this one because I have been wanting to ask you this personally. But beyond investing in companies, Mimesis led the funding for the short film Bitcoin is Generational Wealth, which is one of my favorite pieces of Bitcoin media. If you haven't seen it, it's a 20-minute video essentially describing what the future could look like on a Bitcoin standard, and I just love it. So I'm curious, how did that project come about, and can we expect any more in the future?
Well, I think that's a one-time project, Leishen. There's no, it's just like Bitcoin, right? It's out there. There's no second version of it. So that concept really is building around the thesis at Mimesis Capital where Bitcoin is generational wealth. And I want to find a good editor, narrator, filmmaker to actually produce a small movie, a film, to actually, tell a story, or actually describe the term in a more emotional, motivate way. So I initially, I hit up the Tomer Starlight on X. So I DM'd him. I told him I love your work. I love how you write your essay. It's very motivated, very emotional. And I like the world that you described. And I like your writing style, basically. So I contact him and tell him to write on this topic, Bitcoin generational wealth. So it started with the writing. It started with the essay describing, what is Bitcoin generational wealth, and later on, me and Tomer just discussed, should we make it into a media, right? Should we make it into a film? So I funded that project, and he goes out there to find filmmaker, and he personally narrate the essay, right? The essay in the movie that Tomer is narrating, that is written before the film. So you have the essay first and the film later, and Tomer has a good voice, and his narrator ability is amazing. So he narrated the whole film, and we find different supporter like Bitcoin Magazine, MicroStrategy, to agree on supporting this, and it become a project. That's it. It really just started from the very a simple idea that I wanted to make a moving, motivated media around this idea of Bitcoin generational wealth. Fortunately enough, I found great people to support it, and it become I don't know, it probably become the best short film in the Bitcoin history. Maybe it's not, but I think it's very, very motivated. Every time I watch it, I kind of like getting emotional.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, usually they say the book is better than the film, but I think for this one, the film has to be better than the essay itself because it really does provoke emotion. So if you haven't seen it, highly recommend going and watching it because, yeah, there is no second best Bitcoin short film. But Louis, man, really appreciate you coming on. Would love to have you on again. I want to give you an opportunity to plug whatever you want to plug. If the people want to follow you on socials, plug it here.
Yeah, so you guys can follow me on x.com. My handles is Lis Lieu. You can find me there, and I welcome any DMs if you need my help. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Louis.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the show. Quick reminder that New Foundations is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and nothing should be construed as investment, financial, or legal advice. Business owners, business operators, and those who are Bitcoin curious, let's connect. Visit acropolistreasury.com to learn more or to get in touch with our team.